actions of Israel. So their strike into Qatar was, I talked about it as being a bit like the strikes into Mozambique when Rhodesia was undergoing its fight for or against independence, and how there was a feeling by the Rhodesian forces that their operations were being leaked ahead of time by the British Foreign Office to the leadership of ZANU, um, which was the group that Mugabe headed up at the time, and then they merged, or another group merged with them, and they became ZANU PF. But he, at the time, headed up a very Marxist, I think, is the correct um, ideology to identify. They were very much a left wing, very much militant and violent, and used their ability to have safe havens within Mozambique to conduct cross-border raids, attacking not only white farmers and population of Rhodesia, but also the indigenous populations, the Africans that worked for them or worked with them. And there's some really quite brutal incidents where um, these cross-border raids into Rhodesia targeted nothing but the black community, and those sort of things got sort of ignored by the broader world community. But the point being that the British Foreign Office was suspected of leaking to Mugabe when these sort of raids, and not just him, but other equivalent leaders at the time, when these raids were coming. And therefore, they were able to leave their strongholds and their safe bases when the attacks came in. So, when Israel struck Qatar, where the leaders of Hamas were, okay, I won't say believed, pretty much acknowledged to be living, and they managed to miss the leaders but catch a bunch of lower level functionaries, quite reasonably the assumption is that somebody told them. Now, Israel said that they told the US and Qatar ahead of time that these attacks were incoming, and hence the question about how Israel could strike high security neighborhood is because, well, the US and Qatar kind of went, yep, we know it's coming. But the subsequent guesstimate would be that somebody leaked that information down to Hamas, and as a result, the leaders were like, yeah, time to step out for a bit. And so the 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 issue is, I mean, people were like, well, people are uninformed about how this sort of stuff is like, well, how did they manage to overcome air defenses and stuff? Well, when Israel struck the nuclear reactor sites in Iraq and Syria and things like that, they kind of coordinated ahead of time. Well, when they struck the Iraqi ones, they coordinated with the Syrians, 12-hour overflight. They coordinated with Lebanon as well. When they struck the Syrian targets not long ago, they coordinated with the Russians, who were providing most of the Syrian air defences. So it's a case of very rarely will they go ahead with a completely solo attack that is not known about by at least somebody. Now, when they were rattling sabres at Iran before the recent attacks against Iranian assets, there were a number of Gulf states who said, yes, we will give you permission to overfly us if you're going to attack Iran, which is basically saying, look, you tell us you're coming, we'll look the other way because we don't like them either, and we can't hit them like you can, and we don't want the bad blood that we already have. So people say, well, how could this have happened? Well, it could have happened because they coordinated, and that's kind of how things happen. That's how it works. Now, How the leadership escaped is probably because somebody told them. Again, it happens. If you have to tell somebody it's coming, you have to expect that they're probably going to tell somebody else. But was it helpful? No, not really. I mean, had they managed to hit the actual Hamas heads, there might be a slight different outcome. But is there? I mean, the fact they missed has probably damaged their standing again, and removed any goodwill they had from suppressing Iran. And they also carried out an attack into Yemen overnight, targeting Houthi sites. So the goodwill, I mean, the fact that they can't reach a ceasefire with Gaza also meant their goodwill was rapidly evaporating. But any goodwill I think that Israel retained post the Iran attacks, I think, has largely gone as a result of the attacks in Qatar and now Yemen. And so people see it as Israel doing whatever it feels like, whenever it feels like, without consequence. When Trump kind of not berated, I mean upbraided, I think is the word. Well, berated uh, the Israeli government for the attacks they launched when it was supposed to be ceasefire against Iran, like within the hours of it ending, of the coming into force. It's one of the few times that Israel has been so openly uh, dressed down, I guess, by the US, or by, I guess, in a way that basically the entire world was like, no, you've overstepped your boundaries. And so, without a corresponding statement again coming out of attacks in Qatar and Yemen, people are just looking at it as, well, Israel's back doing what it kind of always has, which is whatever it feels like, whenever it feels like, and no one's going to pull them up on it. And so, yep, okay, you've got a bunch of people saying, oh no, well, how could this have happened? Well, it happened, and yeah, okay, useless speculation, useless speculation. I mean, they're talking to some professor at a random university saying, oh, it could have been this, it could have been that. Yeah, no, more than likely it was, like I said, and clearly they've had to overfly. Well, Jordan, I doubt they went down the Red Sea and flew over Saudi. I think they came that way down to Qatar. But again, there were people that knew it was coming. People that knew it was coming. And it may have been that because they know the air defense quality of some of these nations, they might have gone Syria, Iraq, Qatar that way. Perhaps. Because the Saudis have a fairly good, fairly reasonable air defense system. The Jordanians definitely do. Kuwaitis, not too bad. And the Americans at LUD would definitely have known what was happening. So, yeah, it would have been, yeah, unlikely they went that way. It wasn't a raid on Entebbe. But, yeah. Um, uh, yeah, okay. I think it's just people, random useless speculation, really, at the moment. So that was questions over how they did it. Then there was only a couple of articles about the attack then in Yemen at the same time. So heavy airstrikes on yesterday. How they conducted it, whether they're airstrikes or missile strikes, who knows? But yeah, targeting Houthis for what they did. But I'd expect to see probably some more articles about that, but it's not as interesting as airstrikes in Qatar. Plus, you have more Western media hanging around Qatar, and Al Jazeera is based in Qatar, whereas not too many people are based in Yemen.